Article 50 has been triggered. We're leaving the EU, the single market and the customs union. What's left for you to complain about?
The deal. You know, all of that's going to happen, and hopefully we're going to get the trigger this week, and that's good news. What worries me a little bit is I'm not sure the government recognise how strong their hand is. You know, just this week at the summit in Brussels, the word in the corridors is that we're prepared to give away our fishing waters as a bargaining chip. So the worry is what deal we get. Are we leaving? Yes, I'm pleased about that.
But in the end, you are an irrelevant voice on the deal because the deal will be voted on in Parliament and you have one MP.
Well, I think actually you're missing the point, aren't you? The real vote in Parliament isn't in London, it's going to be in Strasbourg. And this is perhaps the biggest obstacle that the British government faces, is not what happens in the Commons, it's that ultimately at the end of the 2 years, the European Parliament could veto the deal. Now, what that means is I think we need to adopt a different approach to this. We don't need just to be lobbying in the corridors of Brussels to get a good deal. We need as a country to be out there talking to the German car workers, talking to the Belgian chocolate makers, putting as much pressure as we can on politicians from across the whole of Europe to come to a sensible arrangement. After all, it's in their interests even more than ours.
In what way is the vision of Brexit set out by David Davis this morning and in other times any different from your own?
Well, listen, I'm delighted that there are people now adopting the position that I argued for many, many years. Good.
So like Douglas Carswell, he said he found Mr. Davis's performance this morning, quote, very reassuring.
Well, it is reassuring. And just as when Theresa May was Home Secretary, every performance she gave was hugely reassuring. In fact, she was seen to be a heroine after her Tory conference speeches and then didn't deliver. We have to see. I'm just concerned, Andrew, that even before we start, we're making concessions.
You've described the EU's divorce bill demands. A figure of 60 billion euros has been floated around. You said that's laughable, and I understand why you're saying that. But do you maintain that we won't have to pay a penny to leave the EU?
Just think about this. It's 9 months since we voted Brexit, and assuming we trigger Article 50 this week and it goes on for 2 years, net, we'll have paid 30 billion in since the British people had a vote and said we should leave.
But we're still members.
We are still members, but honestly, I don't think there's any appetite in this country for us to pay a massive divorce bill.
I understand there's no...
And there are also assets here,
my question was not a penny?
Well, there will be some ongoing commitments, but the numbers that are being talked about of 50 or 60 billion pounds are frankly laughable.
Well, you've said that is laughable, but I'm just trying to find out if you'd be prepared to accept some kind of exit cost. It may be nowhere near 60 billion. And of course, we have to do a net agreement as well. The government briefed about our share of the European Investment Bank, which is very chunky too. But would you accept a deal, perhaps in transitional arrangements and so on, 5, 10 billion as part of the divorce settlement?
All I know is we're paying in net £30 million every single day at the moment, £10 billion plus every year. And that's just our contribution at the moment. We are going to make a massive saving on this.
What do you make of what Anna Soubry was saying there, that if there is no deal, and that is now being talked about more. I mean, it may be the government managing expectations here. There is still an expectation we will have a deal. But if there is a no deal, that the government can't then just go to WTO rules, that it has to have a vote in Parliament. What do you make of that?
Well, by the time we get to that, there'll be a general election coming down the tracks of this anyway. So I suspect that if, at the end of this 2-year process, there is no deal... Oh, and by the way, no deal is a lot better for the nation than where we currently are, because we'll be freed of regulations, we'll be able to make our own deals in the world. I think then what would happen, and if Parliament effectively was to say it did not back the end of the Brexit negotiation, a general election would happen pretty quickly.
Let me come on to another subject, and then I'm going to go back to Anna Soubry, but I want to get this to you first. According to reports this morning, one of your most senior aides has passed a dossier to police claiming the Tories committed electoral fraud in Thanet South, the seat you contested in the general election. What evidence do you have?
I've read that in the newspapers, just as you have, and I'm not going to comment on it at all.
Well, you're not aware of the contents of the dossier?
I don't know anything about the dossier.
Even though he was your election strategist?
Well, yes, he was.
In Thanet South?
And I am actually quite dubious as to whether this dossier exists at all. I think perhaps the newspapers have got this wrong. Were there concerns about the downloading of data that took place from that constituency? Yes, but beyond that, we don't know anything.
What about the part of this downloading was allegedly, he has refuted it, done by Mr. Carswell, your MP, to give information to the Tories. Do you have evidence of that?
We have evidence that Mr. Carswell downloaded information. We have no evidence of what he did with it.
No evidence that he gave it to the Tories?
No evidence at all.
If, and of course it's not just your aide who has been making allegations against the Conservatives in Thanet South and in other seats as well. If the evidence was to be substantial, and if it was to result in a by-election being called, that the election in Thanet South had to be fought again, would you be the UKIP candidate?
Well, I probably would.
You probably would?
Yeah.
Just probably?
Just probably.
It would be your 8th attempt.
Well, do you know what? Winning seats in Parliament under a first-past-the-post system is not the only way to change politics in Britain. I would like to think I've proved that.
Very well. Let's go back to Anna Soubry, who was listening to that. Anna Soubry, I think the implication, what we were saying on the panel at the start of the show, and I think what Nigel Farage was saying there would be that if at the end of this process, whatever the vote, the government was to lose it, it would probably provoke a general election. What's your reaction?
No, I think that would be right, because look, I mean, let's get real. I mean, the government is not going to come to Parliament with anything other than something that it believes is a good deal. So if Parliament rejected it, which I think would be extremely unlikely, then obviously it would be a de facto a vote of no confidence, and it would be therefore within the terms of the Fixed Parliaments Act, and that would be it. So I think we should be, I'll tell you what the real problem is, Andrew. I think more likely is that because of the stories that are being put up about the 50 billion, maybe 60 billion, and you look at the way that things are being flagged up, that actually both the Prime Minister and Boris Johnson say we should be asking them for some money back. I think the big fear, certainly the fear I have, is that we'll be crashing out in 6 months.
You think
and
we could
the press? Yeah,
you think we could leave as quickly as 6 months? Explain that to me.
Because I think that they will stoke up the demand from the EU for 60 billion, 50, 60 billion back. And my very real concern is that within 6 months, where we're not making much progress, maybe 9 months, we're not making much progress, and people are getting increasingly fed up with the EU because they're being told it wants unreasonable demands, and then we crash out. And I think what is happening is that the government is putting in place basically scaffolding at the bottom of the cliff to break our fall when we come to fall off that cliff. And I think many in government are actually preparing, not for a 2-year process, but 6 to 9 months off the cliff, out we go. That's my real fear.
Anna Soubry, that's very interesting. I've not heard that expressed before by someone in your position. I suspect, though, that you've just made Nigel Farage's day.
Exactly.
Well, it's a lovely
Farage.
No, it's a lovely thought. But I would just say to Anna Soubry, she's really a bit out of date with all of this. You know, 40 years ago, there was a good argument for joining the common market because tariffs around the world were so high. All of that has fundamentally changed with the World Trade Organization, and we're leaving the European Union, Anna, and we're rejoining a great big world out there. It's terribly exciting.
But what we're not going to do this morning is refight the referendum. No, she was giving an interesting perspective on what could happen in 6 and 9 months rather than 2 years. But we'll leave it there.